A man falls in love with a very beautiful girl, but this girl turns out to be a dangerous vampire from many years ago. What happens next to this man? We will see that in this video. At the beginning of the story, we see a village girl carrying some belongings, walking somewhere. Suddenly a car stops near her, and without thinking much, she gets into the car. However, she sees something shocking, which causes her to faint. She is then taken to an abandoned mansion, where she is laid down. Next, we see a man named Dom, who hands a knife to a woman dressed in black. This black-clothed woman slits the kidnapped girl's throat and collects her blood. Afterward, Dom prays to the dark powers and asks them to accept their sacrifice. He then pours the blood over a female skeleton, and within moments, the skeleton transforms into a living girl. Some time passes, and we are introduced to Richard. When a girl named Tina brings food for Richard, he suddenly grabs her. Just then, Tina's father arrives and warns Richard that he has only been in the village for 2 days and should stay away from their girls. Tina's father then tells Richard that vampires live in the nearby ruins and prey on young girls from the village, draining their blood, which has terrified the entire village. Richard, being a writer who has written many books on ghosts and vampires, does not believe these stories. One day, Richard visits the ruins and sees a strange sight. Suddenly, another girl appears, and Richard gets so scared that he runs away. But another girl appears in front of him, terrifying him completely. Just then, a man named Burton arrives and drives the 3 girls away. Later, Burton tells Richard that he teaches history and art at a nearby school, and that the 3 girls are his students. Burton and Richard then visit the school, where Burton introduces him to Miss Simpson, the school principal. A new coach named Barb arrives at the school along with her niece Marak. The moment Richard sees Marak, he is captivated by her beauty. That night, Marak and Suzanne plan to go to the river for a swim. Meanwhile, Richard tells some villagers about the strange girls he saw at the ruins. Suddenly, they hear Tina screaming, and when Richard rushes to her, he finds her dead, with 2 fang marks on her neck. Meanwhile, Marak and Suzanne reach the river and enjoy their time together. The next day, Richard waits outside the school to see Marak. Miss Simpson, noticing Richard's interest in the school, offers him a teaching job because he is a famous writer. Richard meets the students he will be teaching. That night, Suzanne encounters something horrifying and screams in terror. Dom is seen observing everything from the shadows. Richard is about to tell Burton about Tina's death, but before he can, Burton leaves. When Richard follows him outside, he sees Marak and grabs her. He confesses that he has been trying to tell her how much he loves her. Marak looks frightened, but deep down, she also has feelings for Richard. The next day, Marak tells Miss Simpson that Suzanne has been missing since the previous night. Janet suggests that they should do something about it. Miss Simpson advises waiting, hoping Suzanne will return. However, Janet insists on calling the police, but Miss Simpson confidently says she knows exactly what to do. That night, Burton calls Marak to meet him alone. When Marak arrives, Burton tells her that he knows who she really is. He discovered this when he saw a picture in a dark magic book of a girl named Carmilla, who died 120 years ago. Marak looks exactly like Carmilla, meaning she must have been resurrected by dark powers. A flashback shows Marak and Barb in the past. Hearing this, Marak approaches Burton, but he pulls out a cross, scaring her. Then, kneeling before her, he declares that he wants to stay with her and worship her. Marak, pleased by his devotion, drains his blood, killing him, and then leaves. The next morning, a girl finds Burton's dead body and screams in terror. Later, Barb brings Dom disguised as a doctor to examine Burton's body. Dom falsely declares that Burton died of a heart attack. Due to the suspicious events happening at the school, Janet visits Richard and expresses her concerns. She believes something is wrong because Suzanne disappeared, and now Burton has mysteriously died. She asks Richard to come with her to the police, but Richard says they should not rush and should go tomorrow. Janet agrees. After Janet leaves, Richard finds a painting of Mirak that Burton had made. He then discovers a picture of Carmilla in a dark magic book, which matches Mirak's painting exactly. Richard visits Burton's body and notices 2 fang marks on his neck. The next day, Richard asks Mirak to meet him at the mansion, and she agrees. That night, when Mirak arrives, Richard tells her that he saw Carmilla's picture in the dark magic book, and she looks exactly like her. He suspects that she is Carmilla, the dangerous vampire. Mirak suddenly kisses Richard and says, "If I were a vampire, you would be dead by now." Richard believes her words. Later, when Richard returns to his room, he finds Janet there. She urges him to go to the police, but Richard refuses, saying, "Miss Simpson will handle everything." Janet becomes sad and leaves. The next day, Janet calls a police officer named Heinrich to the school and informs him about Suzanne's disappearance. Heinrich gets furious at Miss Simpson for not informing the police earlier. Janet takes Heinrich to the place where Burton's body was found. Meanwhile, Richard continues to secretly meet Mirak. A little later, Heinrich goes near a well and climbs down using a rope. Inside, he finds Suzanne's dead body. However, when he tries to climb back up, Dom cuts the rope, causing Heinrich to fall and die. Meanwhile, Barbara instructs Miss Simpson to write a letter to Suzanne's father, stating that Suzanne died of a heart attack. That night, Janet sees Mirak, who tries to hypnotize her and bring her inside. However, when Mirak touches Janet, she sees a cross and gets scared, running away. The next day, Suzanne's father arrives at the school and demands to see his daughter's body. He is sure that she did not die of a heart attack. Upon seeing her body, he realizes that a vampire has drained her blood. He immediately informs the villagers that vampires live in the mansion. A priest is summoned, and a plan is made to attack the mansion. The villagers, armed and ready, head toward the mansion. Meanwhile, Dom, Barb, and Mirak plan to escape, but seeing the approaching villagers, they retreat inside the mansion. The villagers storm the mansion and set it on fire. Richard arrives and enters the burning mansion. Mirak approaches him, pretending to kiss him, but she is about to drain his blood. However, Richard pushes her away, causing a large wooden beam to fall on her, killing her. Seeing this, Dom and Barbara flee. Richard is brought outside.